Hello, and welcome to Insightful Conversations with your host, 3 Principles practitioner, Adey-Jones. Join her each week as she welcomes some of the world's leading 3 Principles teachers and practitioners who share how this understanding has dramatically improved the quality of their lives and the lives of those they work with.
Hello everyone, I'm so thrilled to be joined today by Rebecca Perkins. Rebecca is a well-being and resilience coach and author of Best Knickers Always, 50 Lessons for Midlife, and Recovery from Within, a mother and daughter's journey through anorexia. Rebecca and her daughter Bea have been on a transformative journey through anorexia to recovery and now share what they have seen about the health and well-being that is innate within all of us. Rebecca works with people who are struggling with anxiety, panic attacks, addictions and eating disorders, as well as those caring for them. Welcome, Rebecca, and thank you for joining me today.
Oh, thank you, Del. I'm so pleased to be here.
Oh, that's wonderful. I know we were just sharing our shared Welsh roots.
That's it.
So I just finished reading your book. It was absolutely amazing. I really, really enjoyed it. And for myself, I found that you could replace the word anorexia by a lot of other things as parents about how we feel when our children are struggling. So I'm going to start off by asking, how did you come across the principles? How did you and Bea come across the principles?
Yeah, well, I trained as a coach about 12, 13 years ago, and I'd come through the NLP route. And that's kind of what I was doing work-wise, working, coaching, and that's where the midlife book came from. So I was working with women in midlife, and it was really interesting because I'd always, even after doing the training, the NLP and the coaching, I always felt there was something missing, that it seemed effortful sometimes, and that clients they'd find a certain level of stability or feeling okay, and then they'd often come back and say, "Oh, can you do that thing again that we did?" So I was looking for something, but didn't really know what I was looking for, I guess. And then a friend of mine, somebody I'd done NLP with, we met for coffee one day, and she started talking to me, and I didn't have a clue what she was talking about, but she was trying to say to me, "You need to take a look at this stuff." And there was something, it made no sense to me what she was saying, but there was something that I felt in what she was saying that was important, that I should take notice of it. So I did, and that was about 3.5 years ago now, maybe. And the moment I had a conversation with somebody who'd been sharing the principles, and she was running workshops and retreats and things. She lived fairly near to me. And I spent an hour with her, and it was like, oh, this is it. I found it.
Yeah.
And it was such a relief. It was like the search was over. And I just devoured everything I could, became a bit of an evangelist, as we often do. Probably got on everybody's nerves, my children included, and then began to share it with them.
Yeah. That's one. I totally, you just told my life story too, on a search for many, many years. And something was always, I was always efforting to just, and all kept going back to the source of what I thought was the source of my comfort, whether it was therapy or NLP or whatever it was I was going back to, like you say, do that thing to me again, comfort me again. And then when I found the principles, it was like, oh wow. And it really did. It felt like the search was over. I love that. Now, I know that you, I really want to focus, as I said, I just finished your book. Even though I love the title of The Best Knickers Always, that's going to be my next book. but the Recovery from Within, it's a beautiful book. And I love how you and your daughter Bea, you both get to speak in the book. And from, correct me if I'm wrong, but from what I read, Bea had been struggling long before you came across the principles. Is that right?
Yes. So Bea started, or her anorexia was diagnosed when I was training to be a coach. So that's going back. So she's 26 now, and she was diagnosed when she was 14. So 12 years ago. And it was a tough time. It was a really tough time. I was grateful that I was actually going through my coaching training, because at least I was getting some kind of support, and I guess with the NLP, I knew it was something to do with thought. Thinking played a huge role in it, and obviously now with hindsight, being able to look back and think, oh, that makes sense now. I understand why I felt like that then, or why she might have been doing that then, or why I said that then. Because it was coming from a place of wisdom, which I now see. And one of the biggest things for me in the understanding was seeing that the anorexia was something she was experiencing. It wasn't who she was.
Yeah, absolutely. Just being able to...
I knew that back then. And now I know why I knew that, or why that was right, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, just explain that a little more for people listening that might not be able to understand what you're pointing to there.
When Bea was struggling with her anorexia, that's all she could see. It was her. And we used to have flaming rows about it, because I'd say, it's not you. This is something you're experiencing. But for her, it was so all-consuming. The noise was so loud. The thoughts that she had were so compelling and so demanding of her that she couldn't see beyond that. It consumed her completely. And I could see that at times, and I think the best way to explain it is that when anorexia was speaking, she was sharp and spiky and pointy, and her voice was sharp. And when it was her, she was soft. And she'd collapse and she'd cry, but that was her. And there were times that we'd be sat on the sofa watching a film together, and she wasn't having anorexic thinking. Anorexia wasn't there then, so it wasn't her. It was what she was experiencing.
Yeah, well, I mean, the way you describe it is how people describe, somebody. I was sharing with I was talking about your book earlier with somebody, and sharing that you can substitute that word for anorexia for somebody that has suicidal ideology or an addiction, or many of those things, because your children, they're not constantly depressed. They're not addicts. They have addictive thinking and they have depressive thoughts, but that's not the totality of who they are. And I completely see that. And I loved a couple of things that Bea shared in the book that really struck me. One was that she, gosh, it's going to escape me now, but I know what it was. It was around that being a perfectionist and being really good about, being a good anorexic. That was so interesting to me, that thinking. So, but I think, again, as you say, as caregivers, we can have thinking that overtakes us too. So can you share a bit more about what that was like for you as a parent and the responsibility you felt?
Yes. Oh, it was, well, I guess I'd known for quite a while, without admitting to myself, that she had an eating disorder. I was too frightened to go there. And I talk about it in the book, about January the 1st, 2008 was the day I finally kind of owned up to myself, because of something that my sister had shared with me about, asking directly that question, does Bea have an eating disorder? And I think one of the things I felt, and one of the things I couldn't, I guess I'd hidden from for so long, was this fear of shame, of this feeling of shame. Because there was part of me that was thinking, what had I done that had resulted in my daughter having an eating disorder? Was it I was a bad parent, a bad mother? Was I not? Was I too controlling? Was I too loving? Was I focusing on her brothers rather than on her? And did she feel that she was stuck in the middle? And there were, all of this. And it just takes you over. And and the thing with an eating disorder as well, it's that it's very private. I mean, you can see somebody who's losing weight, but there's this sense of don't tell anybody, because people find it really hard to know what to say.
Yeah.
So I felt complete isolation. And that was really tough.
Yeah. Yeah, I have eating disorders in my family, so I've witnessed it, and I also witnessed my mother and very similar emotions, the not wanting to admit it, and then blaming herself, and then wanting to be almost the only one that could help my siblings through that experience. And Bea talks about it too. She talked about that it felt almost like it was just you and her. Yeah. It was such a symbiotic relationship in a sense at that time. You were both suffering so much on different ends of the same illness. So and I also wanted to talk about, so what were how did you see the progression of her for want of a better word, getting better, compared to the classic therapies they would use for anorexia, and then when you came across the principles? Was there a shift that you saw there?
Oh, absolutely. So it was really interesting. The first couple of years, well, I guess up until the point where she went off to university, so when she was 18, she'd weight restored within a few years. So we were having weekly, and it was just her and me, weekly weigh-ins, meeting with a psychiatrist or psychotherapists. And I mean, we tried all sorts of things. And it was a real battle, but it came to a point where she'll say she didn't want to get better for herself. She wanted to get better for me. So she'd got to a point of being weight restored, and then was signed off, that it's like, okay, you're fine now, off you go. But the problem was, mentally, she was not there. She still had very confused thinking, I guess. Still very much an anorexic mindset. And we kind of lived with that. We got used to it. It was like living on eggshells, but it was that was life. And she'd been led to believe that she would always have this, that she would have to just manage her eating disorder for the rest of her life. So it kind of just became something that we didn't even see. It was just part of life. So examples of that would be, so if she came home for the weekend, or she was home for the holidays, I would, without knowing it, be complicit, because I'd be thinking, okay, so what can I cook? Because she had what she called a blacklist, and there were foods that she just didn't go anywhere near. So I became complicit in that blacklist as well. And I would think, okay, I can't do that, can't do that, can't do that. What can I cook that everybody's going to eat, that I know Bea will eat? So we danced around. It was the elephant in the room. It really was. Yeah. But I was too frightened to go there, because I didn't want, so this is pre-principle understanding. I thought that I had the power to trigger it in her, so I wouldn't go near that subject. So we pretended it wasn't there. So we lived like that up until about 2 years ago, to be honest. Bea had begun to see a shift in her anxiety that she struggled with because of an understanding of the principles. But it's really funny that I never once thought about, oh, this would be amazing, and maybe she won't have anorexia anymore, because that was such a big blind spot. Yeah. Because I didn't as I say, it was so a part of our way of life that I didn't see anything else. And then she had a conversation, the three of us had a conversation with a colleague of mine called Mary Franklin Smith, who works as a principals practitioner up in Yorkshire, in the NHS. And she was curious to speak to Bea just to find out about what she was seeing and what changes she'd seen in her recovery, etc. And it was one of those moments where we were sat on a video call, we could see each other, and Bea was talking about her blacklist. And Mary called her out on it and said, "You do know it doesn't exist." And it was like, all of a sudden, Bea began to see, oh my God, she had a big insight.
Wow.
And as she'll say, you know, it wasn't like suddenly she was off down the chip shop, but it was a gradual awakening to seeing through the illusion, seeing that the blacklist was created in thought, and because she'd created it, she didn't have to believe it anymore.
Yeah. That's so profound. And I feel for you. I mean, I know that feeling of, you know, having had a child with depression, that blacklist of areas to go. You know, for ourselves, we have our own blacklist. Can't go there, shouldn't say that, no, that can you know, we prior to the principles thinking that we could trigger a reaction or make the matter worse or something. So that's very, very common, I think, with parents that are standing by watching their children struggle. So that you would say that was one of the first breakthroughs, that when she saw that she had created this list and could in fact uncreate it, basically dissolve it.
And she was then able to go through and start ticking things, you know, crossing things. And it wasn't even a written down thing.
No,
you know,
exactly.
It was something that was created in her head. But she was able to mentally go through and to start trying foods that she hadn't eaten for a decade, as she would say.
Yeah.
So the joy for me as a parent to see that, and to be able to say categorically that Bea has recovered, she's not in recovery, she's recovered. Yeah. And that's what we share with people now.
Yes, exactly. And I think there's also, I mean, having a child with depression, I was basically told, you know, because I would watch it come in waves, and I would be told, well, you know, and when he was out of the depression, I'd feel like, and then he'd sink again. I was on this sort of roller coaster, and I remember somebody saying to me, "No, he's going to suffer from this all his life. This is something you better get used to. So rather than you going through this sort of, you know, the ups and downs of it, just accept it and then stabilize, knowing it's always going to be there." And I think it's like a sort of a safety net almost, to when you don't know any better, that if you don't get your hopes up, basically. But I think this, you know, this is what we learn and what we teach. It does point to that it isn't a life sentence. Once you see something, you see it.
Well, that's it, and you can't then not unsee it.
Yeah, exactly.
And the beauty of this kind of falling away of stories of all of the limitations for both of us, to be honest.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Because I now, and somebody asked me this the other day, do you ever fear that it would come back? And I said, I used to. I always felt that in times of stress or struggle, that Bea would go back to that default setting. But now I can take that off my list because I know she's fine. I know she's well. And sure, she has thinking about food, but I do, and we all do at times, you know, but we know now not to take it seriously.
Yeah. Yeah, I love what you say. The default setting went from this is a behavior she'll go back to the default setting, recognizing that, you know, she's going to have some thinking, but she's going to come back to that incredible place of knowing where her, you know, her well-being is and finding that within herself. So tell me a little bit about, I know that you work with other families, and so do you always work with the parents and the child, or how do you work?
It depends what what works for the family, really. I often, if I'm working with younger people, then I'm in contact with the parents, but not specifically working with the parents, let's say, and my focus will be on the young person that's struggling. But then sometimes, and this is what I'm finding more and more, in fact, daily now, getting emails or messages on Instagram or whatever from mums tends to be saying, I'm reaching out because I don't know what to do. Yeah. I am frightened. I can't seem to say the right thing. Can you help? So there's something, and it's really interesting how this is growing. In that, so our book was published in November, and I had begun to work with some young people. And to be honest, I've got clients who are in their 40s and 50s who've had eating disorder for 30 plus years. Yeah. But there's this now, B and I are talking about, this is our life's work. We want to do this. We don't want people to suffer as we suffered. So it's like, well, how can we do this? So we're looking at all sorts of things, maybe creating a membership for our website so that people can just join and be part of the community, because isolation was such a big thing for us. So, we offer retreats, and people can come on their own or with a family. And I live right by the sea, so there's something so magical about being able to walk out on the beach.
I know, I've seen the photographs, they're beautiful. It looks amazing there. Yeah, that's so, it is, like you said, you feel so isolated as a parent when your child is struggling, and some of the issues that our teenagers struggle with are more visible than others. Somebody with depression can put on a happy face, but when somebody has anorexia, it is a little more visible. And I think sometimes people can isolate more. But it's lovely to know that, that there's a community of people that have gone through the same experience. And I, for myself, being a parent of somebody that struggled with depression, it was once I got the help, through the principles, to not be, to trust that their well-being was within them, even when I couldn't see it, but just trusting that, it calmed me down. And the more I calmed down, even if I hadn't been saying anything, even though I was like watching what I said, I think the general feeling of hypervigilance and concern was palpable. And I think once I calmed myself down and had that trust that they would be okay no matter what, I would be okay no matter what, it just shifted. Everything shifted from that point forward, I thought, for myself. Do you find that?
I couldn't agree more. And I was doing a talk the last Wednesday down in Cardigan in West Wales, and was speaking with a group of parents, grandparents, and some health care workers, and just saying this. And and I said, because I wasn't directly sharing the principles, but that's what we talk about in our book, and that's what I'm seeing. And I said, look, what I'd love you to see is the health beneath the eating disorder, the health that's there. And I know that might sound like, well, what do you mean they're ill? Can't you see that they're ill? And it's like, look for the times when the eating disorder isn't right here, front and center. Look to the times when you're out walking the dog, or that you're laughing at a comedy show on the TV, or you hear her with her friends or him with his friends, and they're shrieking about something. That's what I'm pointing to. See that. And see that in yourself as well. The times that you're watching a sunset in your yoga class, or in looking at a painting, or stroking your pet, or whatever it is, when you're not thinking about the eating disorder and the struggle or the pain, then see your health in that. Yeah. And the other thing that I shared that I think is so important for carers is to model self-care. to look after yourself, because it's the thing that we hear every time we get on a plane, isn't it?
Yes.
If there's a drop in cabin pressure, the oxygen masks will automatically drop from the ceiling. Put yours on before you help anybody with theirs.
It's so
We
true.
don't do that, but we don't do it in
Exactly.
life.
I think culturally, as I remember when I traveled with my young children, I'd be thinking, that's nonsense. Of course I'm going to be putting the masks on them first. I think that's the natural motherly instinct to want to do that. But when we can't, that's the thinking, when we can actually calm down and realize that worry and that hypervigilance is not helping, and to soothe ourselves first. It's like the principles, people say to me, did you teach your children the principles? And I was like, no, that was a terrible idea. They didn't want to know that at all. But when I model it, they can see that, when I live it and I'm just being me, they can see the huge, huge shift in me.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
I think it's the same thing with the self-soothing,
Yeah, and it's just because there's something about if we take time out for ourselves, whatever that is, and it doesn't need to be fancy. It could be just saying no. It could be locking the bathroom door while you have a bath or a shower without interruption. It could be closing the door while you have a conversation on the phone with a friend, or going for a walk on your own. Any of those things. And there'll be something that the health in the person that we're caring for sees that makes sense to do that. So they'll look to see that, well, if mum's doing it or dad's doing it or whoever's doing it, then maybe it's okay for me to do it too.
Yeah, totally, absolutely. It's the sort of demonstrating and modeling rather than telling and not living it yourself. I mean,
well, quite, because that never works.
Exactly. It just looks like hypocrisy to our children.
Yeah, quite.
Yeah,
exactly. The whole do as I say, not as I do.
Yeah. So that's so amazing. So I just want you to share again how people can get in touch with you. I know you said you've got some online things coming up, like support groups and things like that. So share how they can get in touch with you.
Oh, I'd love to. So the simplest thing really is to go to our website, which is recoveryfromwithin.life, and sign up to our mailing list, and you'll get an excerpt from our book. And then we'll keep you up to date with all that we've got planned. We're also on social media. Instagram is probably the best place for us. So if you look for Recovery From Within on Instagram, I think there's a couple of I think there are 2 underscores in between recovery. So it's recovery_from_within. I think that's how it is.
Yeah.
That's the best thing to do. And then contact us. And
I know you do.
We're here and we're listening.
Yeah, I love that. Absolutely. That's all people need, I think, is to feel heard. Unconditional love and being heard. And to feel normal, to know that they're not alone, to know that this is something that, it's just part of the human condition, and nobody's judging. It's very important too. I think the shame that comes up is huge. Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you spending your time with me today.
Oh, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed the conversation.
All right, wonderful. And I hope to see you again soon.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Take care. Bye-bye.